This is WXOJLP Northampton, 103.3 FM, your Valley Free radio station. Welcome. I'm Warren Odess-Gillette, and this is A Baha'i Perspective. A Baha'i Perspective is a radio program that presents a Baha'i perspective on life through interviews. If you want specific information on the Baha'i faith, you're welcome to visit the website www.baha'i.org. That's BAHAI.org. Or you can call the toll-free number 1-800-22-UNITE. Like other folks I interview, Lars Patenaude has more to tell than 1 hour can allow. In this first telephone interview segment, Lars describes his journey that led him to becoming a Baha'i. It includes dropping out of college, going back to college, being a rock and roll band manager, and going to graduate school. I started the interview by asking Lars to describe where he grew up.
I grew up in Scarsdale, New York, which is a suburb just north of New York City. It's a pretty affluent community, so I grew up around a lot of money, people with a lot of privileges. It was not a very diverse community in terms of race, but it did have a mix of religions in terms of there was Christianity and Judaism, which were a lot of my friends were Jewish. Most of my girlfriends were Jewish growing up, so I got a different view that there wasn't just one religion.
And you grew up as Christian, and what denomination?
I was raised Catholic. However, my father is Catholic, and when my mother and father got married, my mother, who was raised Congregationalist, which is Protestant, she converted to Catholicism. However, she never really, growing up Congregationalist, she participated, but not, religion wasn't a big part of her life, but religion was a large part of my father's life. And so she agreed to convert to Catholicism when they got married. So growing up, I was raised Catholic, went to church every Sunday with my father. However, my mother rarely went. She became Catholic to get married, but she never really took to it. So that was my experience growing up with religion. Mm-hmm. The deal my father had was with myself and my brother and sister was that we attend church and Sunday school and all the religious things that go along with Catholicism until we were 15 and were confirmed. Mm-hmm. And then he said once we were confirmed, we were allowed to choose whether we wanted to continue going to church or not. All of us just stopped going to church after after 15. I always felt a presence of God. I always felt there was something. I felt always kind of scared at church. there was an element of fear somewhere in there, and I just never felt really comfortable in the Catholic surrounding at the church, the holidays and things like that. I enjoyed the family aspects of the religion, of the holidays and things like that, but when it involved church, going to the institutional part of it just didn't sit right with me.
Mm-hmm. And as you were growing up, did you experience other friends' religious ceremonies or synagogues or whatever?
Growing up in Scarsdale, as I said, there's a large Jewish population. I was exposed to all the Jewish holidays. Our school system in Scarsdale, we got the Christian holidays off and the Jewish holidays off, so it was very embedded into our community. And all my best friend to this day is Jewish, and all the ceremonies and all the family events and things like that. And there were a couple things I really liked about Judaism, and there were some things that I didn't feel right. I really enjoyed the family aspect of Judaism. A lot of the things that they did was around the family at home, gathering family together. That was kind of the main push, at least for my friends. The main push of their religion was about family. Another thing I really liked was that in Judaism there's no proselytizing. There's no push to make you Jewish. Being Jewish is something that most people are born into, and to convert is a difficult process. Whereas in Christianity, you have a lot of evangelicals or people who are trying to push the religion on you, and that's something that I've never felt comfortable with religion. that was an aspect of Judaism that I liked. I felt very comfortable because I didn't feel pressured in any way whenever I was with my Jewish friends.
Mm-hmm.
However, now that I say that, it just reminded me that in high school I was with a girlfriend, and we talked about the future and things like that, very as young children do, or young kids do. Get excited about the idea of perhaps spending the rest of your life together. And she'd always tell me that if we ever got married in the future, that I would have to convert to Judaism.
Mm.
And that was not a choice. That was prerequisite, and our children would have to be raised Jewish. And that always made me feel kind of strange whenever she said something like that.
Right. It's not uncommon to hear that. I've known a couple of cases where a Gentile who marries a Jewish woman ends up converting to Judaism, so they marry.
My best friend's brother's wife converted to Judaism when they got married, and that was very important to his parents.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that aspect of Judaism because, in terms of the Jewish world, it's a small world, and it's, as I was saying before, conversion isn't very common. You're mostly born into it, so therefore the community is a limited community.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, when you're raising a family, the hope is that you raise Jewish children to carry on the tradition. So that was my experience with religion growing up. Was mostly the being surrounded by Jewish community and being raised in a Catholic family. As I said, my father was far more Catholic than my mother. My mother, I guess I can speak of her. She's always had a spiritual belief. Mm-hmm. As I said, though she never went to church, she wasn't very interested in institutional religion.
Yeah.
But she always spoke of otherworldly things, of God. She believed in the possibility of reincarnation. I definitely, she believed in souls and things that weren't physically tangible. Mm-hmm. So I always felt that she had this influence on me in terms of spiritual belief without specifics. Mm-hmm. Whereas my father was a very specific believer in the Catholic religion, mm-hmm. followed the dogma very clearly. Mm-hmm. When he never, my mother just recently told me he never missed a day he missed one day of church in their 36-year marriage. He missed one day because he had 114 fever, and my mother wouldn't let him go. But otherwise, he's a very serious practicing Catholic.
Yeah, so you had a combination of non-orthodoxy and orthodoxy spirituality in your family.
Yes, that's a good analysis, and it's interesting to see that my brother and my sister and myself, how we all came out of that. My sister is very scientific, and I'm now a Baha'i, and my brother is kind of searching around. Mm. But as I said, the three of us, none of us felt comfortable with the Catholic religion.
Mm. What happened after high school?
I should say in high school, I had kind of an influence also was in Scarsdale, you had an option to be a part of a secondary high school called the A School, which is an alternative school. And it was kind of a smaller community within the public high school. Mm-hmm. So it was a school to try to see different approaches to education, and the school followed Kohlberg's theory of moral development.
What's that?
The theory of moral development that it has 6 stages, going from acting out of fear, obedience, punishment, up to the 6th level, whereas you are acting for the good of humanity. You're acting, you do things just because you believe it's a good thing to do, mm-hmm. not because you're being watched or told to do something. Mm. The idea behind the school was that a student who's acting on a higher moral level is going to get more out of education. They're going to attack the curriculum in a different way that a student who's not involved with the curriculum would be. The education becomes a vehicle for somewhat, enlightenment almost. Enlightenment and a path to help the world. An introduction to thinking beyond myself, mm-hmm. Thinking to higher aspirations. Before that, growing up in Scarsdale, where affluence is common, and most of the people are very successful in business, and the idea of succeeding is monetary, is material, big house, nice cars, country club kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then I all of a sudden am exposed to this new education view that the purpose of education is not to get the good job and get money, but is to figure out how you can fit into the world and add to the world and help the world along. Mm-hmm. And that had a big impact on me. Yeah. And looking at it now, I see that immediately it affected me, but it took a little while to really take root.
Mm. Now, I have a question. Was the school attempting to basically transform people from one, let's say, lower level consciousness to this higher level consciousness?
Yes. It was talked about from the start of when you entered the school. You were told that, this is, you studied the theory of moral development, and the head of the school said, the hope is that we all try to get to higher levels of development. And the belief was that the higher you are on the development chain, the more whole human you are, the more you can help the world. And that was kind of the goal of the school, is to graduate students who are trying to trying to make an impact in the world in a very positive way.
Now, how was the student body selected?
In second year in high school, you could apply, mm-hmm. and about 15 students were taken each year. So it was supposedly a lottery. And, mm-hmm. So I was very fortunate, and by growing up in Scarsdale in such an affluent community, gave the public school the ability to have these kind of things. Whereas I've worked in other schools since, and a lot of communities don't have the resources to have a school such as this.
Right.
So I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to experience such a education before college.
Mm.
A lot of people get to college and start seeing these new type of educational ideas, and I was fortunate to be exposed to it at a younger age.
Mm.
However, as I said, I think it took a little while to take root, because my college years show that I didn't really take full advantage of
what you learned in high school.
My introduction, to the
model.
To the model of moral development.
So what happened in college?
Well, I went to a small liberal arts college in northern New York and got there, and immediately went in, and I didn't take advantage of the school at all. I went there, and I had what I thought was having a lot of fun, and didn't take my classes seriously, and I was asked to leave after my first semester because mm-hmm. I had such a low average, and I really just totally I didn't take part in the school at all. I just went there and basically partied.
Now, what were your study habits at home during high school?
They were okay. They weren't great. I was very interested in the social aspect of life.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I put way more time into my friends and my social life than to my academic life.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to be in this school, this alternative school, because when you were at the school, it was really, you were watched over. You were the community acted as sort of an organism where everyone tried to take care of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So while you were at school, you were encouraged by not only teachers but by other fellow students to study and to work hard and to really apply yourself to develop yourself. Outside of school is another story. When I wasn't in school, I really felt like it was my time. I could do what I wanted. I didn't understand. I didn't get the full idea that to really develop yourself, you need to apply yourself 24 hours a day. You can't just check out after hours and do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
It all has an effect on your life. And that's exactly what I did in college. My first semester, I just felt like I was there to have a good time, and I had I took no responsibility for my actions and for my education. And as I said, I was asked to leave after one semester.
Was that kind of traumatic for you?
It was extremely traumatic. It really shook me to the core, because up until that point, I kind of had this view of life, of how it was going to unfold in front of me. I was going to go to college, meet my future wife, make connections for a future job. I still had these ideas of moral development that were learned in high school, but I still had, I think, material drive growing up in Scarsdale. I still believed that I was going to have a good job. I was going to get a big house, join the country club, raise 3 kids, and have a very comfortable material life.
Right.
When I got kicked out of college, all of a sudden, this whole world got shaken to its core. It fell apart because getting kicked out of college didn't figure into the equation. Mm-hmm. So I found myself at home, and most of my friends were off at college. I was very embarrassed. My parents weren't excited about it, though I must say they're extremely supportive. My parents have always been supportive of me. They've always helped me out and tried to keep me going, though they were, as I said, disappointed. Mm-hmm. But it took a while. I was home, and I tried getting some temporary jobs. I worked here and there, and I kind of saw what the daily 9-to-5 jobs look like, mm-hmm. and I didn't really like it. And mm-hmm. I started to analyze my life more closely. It's kind of takes, unfortunately, for most people and for humanity as a whole, I think it takes these shake-ups to give you the opportunity to look at yourself and to analyze what's going on and what road you're taking, what kind of effects it has on yourself and the people around you. And I didn't really like what I was seeing when I was looking at myself and thinking about the choices I had made. The deal with my college was that I had a year suspension. Mm-hmm. And they highly recommended that I go to a local college and take some courses to show that I'm serious about education. So after 6 months, I'd worked a little while, mm-hmm. and then I applied to the local college and took some courses there and started to take the courses more seriously. I really, for one thing, I didn't have many friends around because they were, as I said, they were off at their respective colleges, and so I started to study really, really hard in school and outside of school, and I stopped going out, and I tried to stay in and focus on my work, and I did quite well, and I was really kind of pleased with myself, and it was a nice experience to see that I could accomplish the work that was put out for me and do quite well. Mm-hmm. And after that year, my original school had accepted me back. Going back, I felt like I was a new person. I had a kind of a new outlook on things and a new game plan for studying and for my social life as well. Mm-hmm. Going back, which is strange because I had many friends from my first term there, and most of those friends, were associated with not studying, right. with a different kind of lifestyle. Right. And I had to somewhat reinvent myself at the school, mm-hmm. which was another, I think, important step in my development, mm-hmm. Because I had to kind of break away from a crowd that accepted me and that I felt a kinship with because I had a lot of experiences with these people, and I knew why and how they did things, but I knew it wasn't good for me, and I knew that I had to find a different crowd of people that were more interested in improving themselves and doing well in school, and also, who had an outlook on life more similar to the one that I had been formulating. Mm-hmm. One of my big things when I got back to college, I kind of had no idea what I wanted to study. I originally, going to college, thought I wanted to do environmental biology or something in the environmental field. Mm-hmm. In my year off, I realized that I wasn't really sure about that. So when I went back to school, I kind of had an open slate, and I just applied to a few classes. And one of the classes I ended up in, unintentionally, was Introduction to Religious Studies. Mm-hmm. And this was an overview course on the study of religion. It looked into a few of the major religions, very general overview. And this course just changed I think I was really afraid of religion from growing up as I did. I really did not like organized religion. As I said, I never felt comfortable in church. When I took this Introduction to Religious class, I saw we studied Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam, and we even looked at Christianity. And for me, looking at Christianity from a academic point of view, it gave me the distance that enabled me to feel a bit more comfortable about it. I really enjoyed this way of looking at religion. And I really enjoyed looking at other religions, especially the Eastern religions.
And when you say looking at it in this way, what way was that?
The academic way was is a detached way. It's safe. It's very safe because you have the credentials of an outsider, but you're able to look deep into the dogma of the religions, the traditions of the religions, the practices of the religions. But you always have that card that says, "Oh no, I'm not a part of this." So it's a very safe way of looking at religions, and especially for someone like me who didn't feel that safe within the religion that I was brought up in. This gave me a new avenue into religion, and I found it fascinating. And I also felt that it was filling something that I needed. I felt, as I was being exposed to these new religions, I felt like there was this world out there that I had kind of let go and now was slowly rediscovering. I eventually declared religious studies my major, and I studied Hinduism. One of the reasons was the head professor at the school of the religious studies department. His main focus was Hinduism, so there was a lot of opportunities to study Hinduism. In fact, I took a semester abroad in India with this professor to study Hinduism more deeply, and that really changed my outlook greatly as well.
Now, what was it about studying religion that so excited you?
As I said, I think it just fit something or brought something back to my life that was missing, that I didn't know was missing, and that was kind of a very subtle feeling. That wasn't. I didn't really analyze that too closely. The other part of it was that in education, I always felt I never liked being too focused into one direction. I always felt that when I was going in one direction, I all of a sudden started looking out at everything else that was going on and lost my focus. And I think when I was away from school and had experienced the working world and getting jobs, I found I was getting put in these very specific jobs, and I could not. It didn't fit with me well. I just didn't have the focus to focus on one little thing or one aspect of life. And I found with studying religion, I was able to study history. I was able to study geography, philosophy, anthropology, sociology. It covered such a broad spectrum of the academic world that it really kept me interested. Whenever I felt myself getting a little too caught up in one thing, I could focus on something else. And also because of it's a comparative course, or I was studying many religions, I could focus on other religions. I didn't have to stay with one religion. It kept my mind very active, which was nice for me. As I said, I sort of went towards the Eastern religions, specifically Hinduism. I found that this religion in particular had such a huge array of things to study and had such a huge history, and it was very diverse. Not only is there 101 million gods, there's also just one God, and there's a million different ways to practice Hinduism. Though today in India there's a movement to say there's only one way to be Hindu, but in studying it I just found it very, very freeing to be able to go at it in so many different ways and to learn so many different things about a culture. And that was another thing, that studying religion was such a wonderful way to discover cultures, because most cultures are based on a religion. And if you get into the religion, you can really start to understand why cultures develop a certain way and why people within that culture act a certain way. And it gave me a new perspective on the world and why the world works the way it does now, and why certain countries and peoples see other peoples in one way or another. So that is why, some of the reasons why studying religion fascinated me and really made me feel that I'd found something that really spoke to me. As I was studying religion, I started to lose that spectator's license. I started to dabble in the philosophies and ideas of the religions, and kind of would try to act out different traditions of different religions. I started to practice fasting once a week, and I'd practice vegetarianism. A lot of this stuff came from Hinduism. I tried to be more conscious of my actions, taking things from Buddhism and Jainism, nonviolence in thought and in practice. Going to India also, I got to almost, really immerse myself in a Hindu culture, in a Muslim culture. it was funny being a Caucasian male walking around India. I would dress in Indian garb, and I felt very Indian, and I would sometimes catch my reflection and see how
how not Indian you looked.
Yeah, and it was funny. A lot of when you meet a Christian Indian, the first thing they think is that you're a Christian because you're white. And I would whenever I met someone who was a Christian Indian, and they would say, "Oh, you're Christian," I'd say, "No, no." I was very adamant that I was not Christian, and I wasn't anything, but I was, if anything, it was more Hindu than Christian, and I was really kind of confused. Yet I was moving spiritually throughout many different worlds. I think what it was called in the academic world was the salad bar religion.
Was it salad bar?
Yeah, take a little bit of
the eclectic.
Yeah, of all the religions. Take what you like of each one.
Yeah.
I thought that was the answer. It was actually, I thought maybe if everyone had studied religious studies, the world could be a better place because everyone could take a little bit of every religion, take the best of every religion, and become that. And I started to tell this to one of my professors, actually my advisor. I said, I think I want to write a thesis about the mix of all religions and try to find the cohesion, find the thread that runs through all the religions. At least in my experience in the academic religious studies world, that is very much frowned upon. The goal is to take apart religions and study the details, and any attempt to try to put them together goes against the idea of the study of religions. And I was just told again and again, don't do that. Just pick a topic of one of the religions and get into that, but don't try to put all the religions together because it just doesn't work. And unfortunately, no one mentioned the Baha'i faith. So I never. It's interesting. In 4 years of studying religion, I had heard the Baha'i faith one time, and that was because a fellow student was a Baha'i. But he never talked about it. He just said one day in class, the professor was asking about religions, and one of the students said, "Oh, I'm a Baha'i," and that was it.
It didn't pique your interest?
Not at all. I think I was just focused on the larger religions at that time, and and it just didn't click at that moment.
Right.
For who knows why.
Sure.
So I kind of just went on in that way for a while, just kind of looking at all the religions and trying to take the best of each one. Actually, there was a danger in that I experienced, and I didn't know what it was until very recently. This is all taking place, by the way, in the early 90s. I graduated in 96. So in 95, I was in India. In 96, I was still in school. And in studying or in trying to take it from all these different religions, I think without an anchor of a particular faith or a particular moral belief, religious belief, you can get somewhat prideful. There's a book by Mr. Adib Taherzadeh that many Baha'is know called The Covenant of Baha'u'llah. The prologue to this book is just fantastic, and I was told a couple of years ago that I should read this, and I did, and I've read it probably 100 times since. And he talks about, in the last part of this prologue, he talks about the kingdom of names, which is what God showers down upon us, the names such as courage and kindness and generosity and love and respect, all the attributes of God. And he talks about how one of the great dangers is to take these names of God and to make them your own. It's similar to, the rain comes out of the sky and it lands on you and makes you wet, and you shouldn't be proud of being wet. The rain made you wet, so it's, God showers down generosity upon you, love, kindness. You should be these things, but not take them as your own, as your pridefulness. And I think when I was dabbling in these different religions and trying to find my perfect religion, I really got to enjoy the feeling of feeling religious, feeling spiritual, feeling generous. And I enjoyed them in a way that was, I look back on now, and I think I was quite prideful. And I really liked that people saw this certain person that I was. And I think I enjoyed it for the wrong reasons. And as I said, until reading this prologue in the Covenant of Baha'u'llah, I really didn't understand what I was going through back in the mid-'90s. I didn't really understand what went wrong in my outlook. Because as I'll go on to explain, things didn't continue on in a positive way. I looked around and I saw a world that I really didn't like, and I felt like, oh, I'm this very religious person, and I'm have all these great attributes, and I just felt detached from the world. I was kind of losing connection with the world, and I graduated from college, and I decided I was going to hitchhike around the United States and try to figure out how to improve the country and improve the people. And in traveling around, I kind of lost my goals. I just felt I just got pulled back into the world of personal
gratification.
Yeah, exactly. Personal gratification over trying to do things to better the world. As I was saying earlier, I think it's because of the misunderstanding of the names of God, of misunderstanding of the beauties that God gives us, that caused me to overstate my abilities, or I didn't have the capacity to deal with the world as it was. I took it on without the abilities I needed, and I was lost. After a while, I hitchhiked around, and I saw the country and met many people. And I did have many wonderful experiences, and I got to meet a lot of very interesting people, and I found that the United States is far more diverse than I ever thought it was. It has many different cultures. It's not just one American culture. I look back on these things, and I see that it really added to kind of help me on my path. But I did lose, I think, my direction for a while. And I came back to the East Coast, and a friend of mine was starting a band, or was actually in a band, and they were all graduating from college and wanted to go professional. And I told them I'd be their manager. And for many years, I worked in the rock and roll business, managing a band. I felt different the whole time. I never, the world of music in the Northeast at least, it's filled with drinking and drugs, and the hours are horrendous. It's late night, going from town to town, going to bars and theaters, and the people that I was surrounded by were just it was just people who were lost, and it was a mess. It was people just did not know, had no grounding, and I was losing my grounding as well, and it felt like this isn't me. I would think this for years. I was doing this for years, and I just never felt happy. I would see my friends or family, and they'd say, "Oh, how are you?" And I'd say, "Oh, I'm great." And inside, I'd just say, "I'm not great. This is horrible. This isn't fun, and this isn't how life is supposed to be." But the thing is, when I met the guys in this band, they said, the world is in bad state, and the way to make it a good place is to let people have fun, is to play music and let people drink and be merry. And for a while, I tried to convince myself that they were right, that the whole purpose, the only way to make the world a better place was to make people happy, and the way to do that is to play music and drink and dance and things like that. And but it never felt right. I could never convince myself that this was actually making the world a better place, because I'd look around and I'd see that everyone around me was lost, and no one was really happier, and it wasn't making the world a better place. So slowly, I was living in northern New York in the Lake Placid area, and I started looking for other jobs. As I was managing this band, I started to work at a local school. I started working in their department for kids who were on the verge of being kicked out of school for disciplinary actions. As I said earlier, a lot of communities in the United States don't have a lot of money, so therefore they don't have a lot of services. My education background was a religious studies background. I had a BA, that was it. And all of a sudden I'm in charge of students who have huge disciplinary problems, learning difficulties, family problems, personal problems, and I'm the only myself and one other person was taking care of these kids, and trying to get them through their classes, because their normal teachers couldn't do it, and they couldn't work in a normal classroom. And this all of a sudden I felt like, okay, here is something that I can do that's positive, that's not surrounded by bad elements that the band was surrounded by. So I worked for a couple of years while I was still managing the band. I was doing this at the school, and I started to realize that it was sad that I was the only person, aside from one other person, who was trying to help these kids, or that the school couldn't provide anyone, and the state wouldn't give the school money to provide to help these kids who were totally lost and really having a hard time. And I would go to their houses and try to see what their personal lives were like, and a lot of them came from broken homes. They really didn't have any good role models. It was a huge eye-opener for me. I would kept going to the principal and saying, we need to do more. We need to have a larger program. And he said, I don't. There's no money. The state won't give us any more money. So this is it. I felt like where I was at, I was just not doing enough. So one day, after working with some kids, I went to the computer lab and I typed in a few things. I think I typed in graduate school, peace, religion, education, and just pressed, search on Google. The first school that came up was a school called Landag Academy. It had a graduate program, and it was in Switzerland. And this is somewhere I've always wanted to go. And the school looked beautiful. And I just had this instinct. I just had this first thought. I said, that's where I'm going to end up. I ended up doing a large search for graduate programs. And I decided that I wanted to do graduate school outside the United States. So I looked at all these schools, applied to about 10 schools. But I also applied to Landag. And they were the first school that got back to me, and I agreed to go there. And,
what year was this?
This was in 2000. In my research in the school, I learned that it was a Baha'i-inspired school. So I put my religious studies academic skills to work and did a little research and saw everything I liked, everything I agreed with. I saw it as a non-threatening religion. Mm-hmm. I felt like I could go to a school inspired by the Baha'i faith, and I wouldn't feel that I was compromising any of my beliefs or compromising my freedom to think. That it was a school that I could go to and pursue what I wanted. I say this because there are some religious institutions that are very much founded on their principles and beliefs, and those principles and beliefs may be limiting, may cast a shadow on other principles and beliefs. And I didn't want to go to a school that limited pursuits in any ways. And looking at the Baha'i faith, I saw, okay, this school looks like they would allow me to go in many different directions and wouldn't hold me back because of the religion the school is based on. Mm-hmm. So I went to Landag in Switzerland. The way the graduate school works there is they start with whatever program you're entering, and the program I was entering was international conflict resolution. I decided on this because I felt like I wanted to do something more with my life than just act on a local level. I think I got that from working at the school in New York, that I felt like it was so localized, and the challenges were so large that I felt like I couldn't get the things done that I wanted to do at this local level. And I saw that a lot of the problems that we're facing were these conflicts of interest, and I felt like, okay, if I could learn about conflict resolution, I could maybe get into a position of changing policies or changing ways businesses or nations did things, and would therefore provide proper education for these problem children in New York. Mm-hmm. And that's how I ended up there. And then one of the great things about Landag that a lot of the other schools that dealt with conflict resolution was that Landag, in their statement, said that their program is based on the belief that the conflict could be resolved. It could be completely resolved. In all the other schools that I looked at, conflict was to be managed. It couldn't be resolved, it was to be managed. And I just didn't think that was enough. I felt like you've got to aim higher than that. You've got to try to go for it all. You can't just take half.
Interesting.
So I went there, and as I said, the first part of their graduate course is no matter what your discipline is, you take a core of 3 courses with 3 of the founders of the school. The 3 were Dr. Hossein Dinesh, Dr. Behruz Sabet, and Dr. Michael Penn. Mm-hmm. Many Baha'is who are listening to this probably have heard their names. Mm-hmm. Myself, going into the school, I'd never heard of these guys. Right. And have since learned, read many of their writings, books that they've written, and have gotten to know them very well, and realized that I was very fortunate to be introduced to the Baha'i faith, to get to listen to these people talk about the faith and talk about the principles of the faith right from the outset. To get an introduction like that was quite overwhelming at first.
No, why was it overwhelming?
These three, and there's many more professors at the school that also taught me so much about the faith and the students. But these three courses in particular were the formal studies. The whole point of these courses was to introduce the new graduate student to the principles that the school was founded on, which is the principles of the Baha'i faith, which I had just barely looked over before I went to the school to see if it was something I could live with. And these professors had been studying the faith most of their lives, and it really had transformed the writings of the faith into material that could be taught academically. I found myself confronted with these huge ideas in just a short period of time. And a month earlier, I had been planning a concert for this band and saying goodbye to people. And the next month, I was listening to discussions on the move towards world unity, the removal of racial prejudice, the equality of men and women, and I was just dumbfounded. And the one thing that I got most rolled over by was something actually I think I was talking with a fellow student, and they were telling me about, I said, tell me a little bit more about the Baha'i faith. This was a student who was a Baha'i, and the first thing they said was, the basis of the belief is this idea of progressive revelation. Mm-hmm. And they explained progressive revelation, which is the belief that God, throughout time, has always sent messengers to guide humanity. All these messengers are from the same God: Abraham, Moses, Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, and eventually the Bab and Baha'u'llah. I almost fell over laughing because this was exactly the thesis that I was looking to write back in undergraduate school. And the one that my professor said, don't get involved with that kind of thinking because it's academic suicide for religious studies to try to put all these religions together. And I'd always felt that the religions of the world had a bond. And when I was told that the Baha'i faith was based on this belief of progressive revelation, I just said, wow, this is something I've always believed, and I just never really had the proper words for it. It just really it made me almost fall backwards. And from there, I learned more of the faith through late-night discussions with other students, with discussions in the classroom with professors, with discussions outside the classroom with professors. And as I was studying, I was doing my academic work, but I was also very interested in the faith. I just really was I was amazed that this faith existed, that it had many principles that I believed in already. It was kind of the culmination of my search for the perfect faith. The Baha'i faith seemed to have all the qualities that I had put together for my own personal religion, but it had that anchor I was speaking of, the anchor that kept you from losing grip on why you were following these certain principles. Mm-hmm. It was quite an experience. This went on for a few months. This introduction to the Baha'i faith, and I'd be studying late at night, and I'd be reading some answered questions by Abdul Baha, which is the son of Baha'u'llah, the founder and manifestation of the Baha'i faith. And I would disagree with something, and I would go next door to my friend's house and bang on his door and say, "What does he mean here? What is this? I don't know if I can. I don't know if I buy this." And whoever's door it would be, they would sit me down and talk with me, and I never felt pushed. I never felt harassed. I was people always laughed at my thoughts and
laughed at your thoughts or your animacy of.
Yeah, it didn't laugh. It took my thoughts very seriously and laughed more at my approach, banging on doors in the middle of the night to get answers and I just really felt at home in this community. I really loved all the students and the professors, and everyone was just very warm and caring. And I was not the only non-Baha'i. There was quite a few non-Baha'is, and everyone there was just really warm and really just trying to find answers and try to improve themselves, improve the world, and try to help each other out. And it was really a great community to be in. I still had a lot of hang-ups from Catholicism of institutionalized religion, and that was one of my biggest hurdles, was how can I, even though this faith has a lot of things I believe in, do I really want to associate myself with this large religion, or this? Well, in terms of the world, it's not a huge religion, but it's
an organized religion.
It's an organized religion, yes, and it has laws and principles, and I just was kind of nervous, and I was kind of scared. I remember one day I was playing basketball with a friend of mine, and I was telling her this, and I was telling her my fears, and she just said, just open your heart up to God and let your feelings drive. You don't analyze it. Don't rip yourself apart with your fears that came from your childhood with other religions. And when she said that, I just was like, wow. Oh, I never thought of it be that simple. Just to trust in God. That was probably 2 months into the time I was at the school, and that really started to change my view of organized religion. That because I had a bad experience when I was a child, because I felt a certain discomfort with organized religion, didn't mean that all organized religions were necessarily bad. Mm-hmm. And as I studied the Baha'i faith more, I learned that these prophets who came down from God gave religion. But after a time, these religions no longer could give the Spirit of God, and a new religion came along and reinvigorated humanity. So I was learning that my experience with organized religion wasn't necessarily a bad experience with God, but it was a bad experience with how God's religion was interpreted by man after the religion had run its course. And for me, that was a big step, because I felt that I could look at the Baha'i faith in a new way. I didn't have to hold it up to the light of Catholicism or the light of Judaism, because my experience with Catholicism and Judaism and other religions, the things I didn't like about them were more aspects of man's inadequacy, not the inadequacy of the prophet or the inadequacy of God. And there's also another thing that Adib Taher-Zadeh, one of his books that I read of his, he said that being a human that believes in God, you have to, at some point in your life, realize that you could be wrong, that you may not be right. And that was something that I think a lot of people, especially in America and myself, have a hard time with, because we learn that we are, we have the capacity to know everything and to be right about everything, and to take that moment to say, hey, I may not be right.
Even in our understanding of our own religion.
Exactly. And to realize that, because there was aspects of the Baha'i faith that I wasn't sure about, and I had to get over that hurdle, that to realize that I may not be right. The Baha'u'llah may in fact be the manifestation of God, and what he says is from God, and therefore is right, and I'm wrong. and that was hard, and I think it might be hard for a lot of Western people to deal with, to let go. I'm sorry, I keep jumping around, but I remember an experience I went to a Baha'i kind of retreat while I was in Switzerland, and the person who was speaking at the retreat spoke of the Universal House of Justice, which is the overseeing administration body of the Baha'i faith. And I remember telling this person after the retreat that I believed in a lot of the Baha'i faith, but I don't know if I could subject myself to an administrative body. And this person kind of just laughed and said, "Well, if you ever come to the point where you think you can, then we'll see." and I think that was to kind of release some of my.
It's interesting you should say that, because we're always subjected to some administrative body telling us what to do, whether it's our government or whatever. So
I think you're right. I actually know you're right, but I think myself and a lot of young people growing up, at least where I was growing up, felt like we were independent of all these things, or had the power to be independent of all these things. Yeah. And it's kind of a delusion. And it's more of aligning yourself with the right administration, to trust in the right people. And I think if you've experienced a situation where you feel like you've been lied to, or if someone hasn't lived up to your expectations, whether it be an individual or an institution, you feel like maybe there's no institution or anyone out there that I can really trust.
Right.
And I think that was my problem, that I really was distrustful.
Sure.
So that was one of my hurdles. And I just felt like I didn't need anyone. I kept saying that to myself. Oh, I've learned all these principles of the Baha'i faith. Why do I have to become a Baha'i? Why can't I just go on living as I'm living? I think I wanted to continue in my salad bar religion, take the best of the Baha'i faith, and not have to live up to its laws and principles, and go my merry way. I was at Rizvan party. Rizvan is a celebration of the time when Baha'u'llah declared that he was indeed the manifestation of God for this day and age, and that took place in Baghdad.
Back in 1863.
I trust you.
Okay.
So this was 2001, and I was at a party in Switzerland at one of the professors' houses, and there was a Baha'i passing through who had just come from Eastern Europe, and he was a real charismatic guy. I can't remember his name, but he was a very charismatic guy. He was from the U.S. He's from Ohio, I believe. And on his way back from Eastern Europe, he decided to stop in Switzerland and visit with the Baha'is there. And so we're at this Rizvan party, and he gets up and he's telling the story of how he became a Baha'i. And everyone in the room is listening to this guy, and he's a very funny person, very open. And he talks about this point where he's been introduced to the Baha'i faith. He really likes the Baha'i faith, but he doesn't want to ally himself in an institution. He wants to be free, be himself, but yet, take all the benefits. So I'm thinking to myself, this sounds just like me.
Right.
And he said one day he was washing his car, and it hits him that he is a Baha'i. And he said he started jumping up and down on the hose that he was washing his car with, and he was saying, no. He was trying to deny it, and really physically trying to deny it, but he said he just couldn't. He just realized that he was a Baha'i, and that was that. And at that exact moment when he said that, I felt it felt like a cannonball hitting me in the stomach. It was so powerful. I leaned over to a friend of mine who was sitting next to me, and I said, I think I'm a Baha'i.
Oh, wow.
And she just started screaming. I put my hand over her mouth, and I said, hold on, don't get crazy. And it was very emotional. It was so physically emotional. I really felt this huge emotion running through me. And this, as I said, it really felt like a cannonball hitting me in the stomach. So I said to her, please, just don't say anything just yet. I'm going to go home, and I need to rest and get my head together. And the party was up on this hill, and I lived down at the bottom of this hill. I felt like I floated down this hill to my house that night. And that night, I had a dream that I was walking on my little street in Switzerland, and I came to the end of it, and there was an individual there, and he was spinning so fast that it was just a blur. And I couldn't get close to this individual. It was just too powerful. But it was this individual I wanted to be around, but I couldn't. It was just too much. But I had to be around this individual and have my ideas of who that person was, or that individual was. That morning I woke up, and I became a Baha'i then.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Lars Patenaude, a Baha'i and a graduate of religious studies from the former Landegg Academy in Switzerland. Lars will be back to share his work in South Africa and the Balkans. For a copy of this and other interviews, you can go to the website www.abahaiperspective.com. For information specifically on the Baha'i faith, you can go to the website www.baha'i.org, or you can call the toll-free number 1-800-22-UNITE.